I'm with Peter A. Bell, one of my favorites Twitter followers and Twitter accounts. As a thinker, a listener, a talker, a writer, he says, none of my attitudes are immutable, none of my conclusions are final, none of my opinions are humble. So you certainly define yourself very well, but now you have to tell me, how do you define the situation in Scotland?
Heartening. I'm very much heartened by the situation. There are problems, obviously, but because I spend so much time with Yes campaigners, I can't help but be heartened by that, because these are fine people, they are good people, they're committed, intelligent, engaged. That's where Scotland's future lies, with these people. So I'm heartened by the situation. We have concerns, and I dare say we'll come to that.
Yes, about the Yes movement and all the politics in Scotland, there's a huge creation of thoughts, different tendencies. And there's people who are very, very good with documentary, and one of the films that impressed me most is The Power Grab, The Prophecy by Phantom Power. Yeah. There's the devolution issue. Do you think the devolution is in danger, the Scottish devolution?
Absolutely. Devolution is very much at risk. I actually don't care that devolution is at risk, but it's the constitutional settlement that is at risk. Obviously, I don't care about devolution. Devolution is dead. Devolution is always about withholding powers from Scotland, not about granting powers to Scotland. It wasn't about enabling democracy. It was about shackling and hobbling democracy in Scotland. So I have no great fondness for devolution, other than the fact that it has enabled us to take the independence movement forward. The question is, what happens when devolution finally ends, and how does it come to an end? And we have two choices, and that there's the way the British government wants to go, which is to roll back devolution, impose Westminster rule, and impose their one nation British nationalism, which is basically an extension of the old Greater England concept, finally coming to fruition. The alternative is that we end devolution by simply dissolving the Union, and there's an end to an old song.
So you think the constitutional issue is the main issue in Brexit, with all this situation with Brexit?
Brexit is merely the context in which all of this is happening. This would have been happening anyway. Scotland's independence movement was going forward anyway. Even if Brexit wasn't happening, even if there had been no EU referendum, we would still be seeking another route to independence. We would still be seeking a democratic, lawful, peaceful route to independence. We need to restore Scotland's rightful constitutional status. Brexit happens to be the context in which all of this is happening, and while there's been a great deal of talk about the economic impact of Brexit, which I think, other than a few fantasists, we're all in agreement will be dire, the economic impact. There's also constitutional implications, which have, until quite recently, been less spoken of. There's been a lot less talk about the constitutional implications until fairly recently. And it's these constitutional implications that concern me, because of course constitution is fundamental, everything else flows from that. All of democracy flows from that. All of politics flows from that.
Peter, you have a date for a new referendum. Do you have a crystal ball or what? Explain me about this, please.
It's actually not that difficult to work out. In the UK, just for example, in the UK we always have votes on Thursday. So when you're trying to figure out when a referendum will be, you can already discount 6 out of the 7 days of the week. You can also pretty much discount winter and summer. Politicians, where they have the choice, they prefer not to have polls in the winter and the summer. Summer, people are on holiday. In winter, the weather's bad. So that's 6 months of the year away, and you can very quickly narrow it down. And then you take into consideration other factors such as other elections, European elections and local government elections, etc. And there's something of a notion in this British political system in which we're embroiled, that there's this notion that voters aren't capable of dealing with 2 votes on the same day or even in the same year. So you can pretty much narrow it down quite easily to 6, maybe 12 dates in any given year. Then deciding on which year. And initially, Thursday the 20th of September 2018, you should make a note of that. That was what I worked out by the process I've just described. That's what I worked out would be the earliest date of a referendum. And I worked that out in late 2014, just after the first independence referendum, when it was obvious that whilst the result had to be respected, we couldn't possibly consider the matter settled, because the no vote, although they won on a totally false prospectus. So the matter was not settled. There was always going to have to be another referendum. The earliest date I could work out was Thursday the 20th of September 2018. Then the whole Brexit thing happened, and long story short, a bit late for that, long story short, it went from being the earliest date to the latest date because of the constitutional implications of Brexit.
You say in your article, no more Mr. Nice Joke. We simply don't have time for any self-indulgence. The threat to Scotland's democracy is imminent. We have to address that threat now. If there is one thing we need, is a sense of urgency. So what do you think the Scottish people, especially those who voted no, would need for a new campaign, a yes campaign? And what do you think this campaign would need to be the winner? Because you say we need to be more proactive. What do you mean?
The thing that was missing from the first referendum campaign, and I have to be a note of caution here, if I sound as if I'm criticising the first referendum campaign and the Yes campaign back in 2012, 2013, 2014, I'm not really. This is with hindsight. You can see these things with hindsight. At the time, the Yes campaign was what it needed to be. And I just like to make that point in case people think that I'm being overly critical of the Yes campaign in the first referendum. But what was missing from that was a bit of negativity. We were obsessed in the first referendum campaign with being positive, with always being positive, with always talking about the hopes and the aspirations and the promise and the potential of independence. We talked very little, if at all, about how the Union affects Scotland. how Scotland is affected economically and democratically and politically and socially and culturally by being part of this union, this anachronistic, dysfunctional union. We didn't talk enough about the actual harm that is done to Scotland, and I think that is what we have to do differently now. We have won the campaign for independence. We have won that campaign. What we need to do now is win the campaign against the union. We have to get people thinking, people who have just simply up until now taken the union for granted. We have to get them actually thinking about what being in the union means for Scotland and what it will mean in the future.
Is what you say also, what is required now is that we open people's eyes to the negative implications for Scotland of remaining bound to the British state, is that?
Absolutely, and we should be able to, it should be easy now to open people's eyes, because the British political elite are no longer even attempting it to be subtle about it. They're being quite explicit about their intentions for Scotland. They are being quite open about the fact that they intend to use the Brexit process as an opportunity to redefine the UK and to redefine Scotland's status within the UK. And this will be done unilaterally. They've already made it very clear. Neither the Scottish people nor our elected representatives will have any input into this at all. It will be done unilaterally, this creation of this one nation British state.
Do you think that the continuity bill is part of what you say now?
The continuity bill going through the Scottish Parliament. The continuity bill is essential in its own right, as an attempt at least to safeguard Scotland's status vis-à-vis the EU insofar as that is possible. It is interesting for another reason, and that is that it seems to be testing, proving some of the processes and procedures which will be required to get the independence-related legislation through Holyrood against the wishes of Westminster, we must assume.
Well, you were in the protest in front of the Spanish consulate in Edinburgh, supporting democracy and the right of the Catalan people to decide its own future. Thank you for that. Do you think the EU has been damaged with this situation in Catalonia and the behavior of the Spanish government?
Initially, I was mildly defensive of the EU. I was a little irked by the fact that the very people, or there was this significant overlap between the people who criticise the EU for acting like some kind of super state. And then these same people, or largely these same people, start to demand that the EU acts like a super state. You know, there's a bit of a contradiction there, there's a bit of hypocrisy. It seems that when it suits some people, they want the EU to act like a sovereign state. It isn't. It's very problematic, to say the least, for the EU to take the position of a state, sovereign state, vis-à-vis in relation to the Spain-Catalonia situation. I mean, we've just come up with terms like interfering in the internal affairs of a nation, and the very fact that Spain has this constitution, which, whatever else we may think of it, actually it makes the whole situation problematic. But now, we have moved on a long way from there. We've moved on a long way from when it was just a case of of Madrid making things difficult for the Catalan independence movement. We've come way beyond that. They are now issuing arrest warrants for politicians. They are jailing politicians. They are hounding politicians all over Europe. And this is aside from the behaviour of the police during the referendum. No, we've come past any point where anybody, even with the best will in the world, can excuse inaction from the EU. I'm not entirely sure what the EU can do, but it should certainly be doing something.
And finally, you think the situation in Catalonia and the way that this has been developed can affect Scotland or Scotland's future?
I'm very wary, always have been very wary, and have cautioned people against drawing too many parallels or too close parallels between Scotland and Catalonia. The British state Scotland situation is constitutionally very different from the Spain Catalonia situation. So we have to make that caveat first of all. But what we see happening in Catalonia, the way that we see Madrid and Rajoy behaving, I haven't the slightest doubt, not the slightest doubt, that the British political elite down in London are looking at that with not little envy, and wondering how they can adopt and adapt these methods at such time as it becomes expedient for them to do so. I'm being very cautious with my language here, but people in Scotland should look at what's happening in Catalonia, and they should take that as a warning. They should heed that warning.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure meeting you. It's been a pleasure meeting you. It's been a pleasure interviewing you. I really love your work, your comments, and well, see you next time in Scotland.
It's been a delight, Pilar. It's been a delight.